Seeing the title of his talk here, I'm really hoping for some memes today. So we'll see. So welcome to the stage, Tim Wadawa-Brown.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. It is, I think, the last talk of the day, or perhaps Adam's got a little bit to say at the end, but hopefully we'll get you through this. We've heard a fantastic amount about how ATT&CK helps others, helps you do your jobs, helps you work with your organizations, defend yourselves. I thought it'd be nice to come back and reflect on how you can work with MITRE and how you can improve the industry as a whole, how you can improve the framework, and how you can make sure your voice is heard so that when you've got ideas of things you would like to see in it, you have a chance of success. So those words aren't the words of MITRE. They're not even the words of Cisco. This is my personal experience 3 years into sitting down and complaining that I didn't like some of the things that ATT&CK represented. It's been a huge success. We shouldn't forget that. But anecdotally, most successful project ever. It's been great for all of the people in this room, all of the people all over the world that are leveraging it. And for someone like me doing professional services, hugely helpful in talking to customers. But as I said, I think it's only been successful because we've contributed to it, we've built it, and it will only remain successful if we continue to update, maintain, improve, and not just take out the bits that help us, but put in the bits that help others. Is it not moving forwards? There we go. Some reflections on the natures of that success. Some places that potentially I would like to see improvements for ATT&CK. It's my selfish view. But you know, we've talked about some of the technologies that aren't covered. I'm sure all of the people in this room have technologies they would sit there and say they care about. There are other frameworks out there. Go and have a look at those. But I think if we just build additional frameworks separately, perhaps we don't make the community and the world as safe as we would like. Things that I think would be interesting to do, things like mapping the relationship between techniques. We all know that these techniques have requirements beforehand and they lead to outcomes that enable other techniques. Perhaps those are the kinds of things that you would like to explore. But I think the point of this talk is there are ways for you to help MITRE with that process, and I'd encourage you to engage with it. So why are these questions interesting from a Linux perspective? I wanted to bring my passion and knowledge to ATT&CK. I've worked with MITRE for probably the best part of 2.5 decades. ATT&CK far more recently. The landscape is changing. If you look at what we were doing in 2018, and look at where we are in 2023, over the last 3-4 years, we've seen a huge uptick in interesting malware. Fast cache, that was the North Koreans allegedly. Light Basin, that was more recent. Both of those targeted very specific verticals and they targeted Linux systems within them. The original complaint I think I had of MITRE was that I felt, perhaps rightly or wrongly, that we weren't looking for the kinds of things that adversaries might do on Linux systems. And I said, well, you know, what can we do to help that? And they said, well, you can come along and you can put your money where your mouth is. So, as a brief summary, that's kind of what the landscape looks like. We've got botnets, we've got Bitcoins, we've got access brokers, we've got ransomware, we've got, as we heard from our previous speaker, the cloud and the supply chain, and we've got those specialists, Light Basin and Fast Cache as examples, who are targeting very specific things for very specific outcomes, potentially political, certainly not the kinds of things that perhaps we think about day to day, but these are the kinds of things that will drive the threat landscape in the future. If somebody is doing this today at the highest end, we've seen over time there is a trickle down. Attackers only get better. So the origins of this talk and the origins of this repo was ATT&CK Community 5 in Europe, in Brussels. I spoke on how I used ATT&CK to help our customers. I then rolled it forwards a little bit and I said, well, one of the reasons it's not as helpful as it could be was this issue about visibility gap in Linux. And Kat said, well, can you come and help? Come Community 8, I was talking about the Unix malware landscape from the perspective of having gone in and investigated some of the areas that I thought were gaps. Last year, I came and talked here about threat modeling. And And then most recently, I spoke at the community event in Brussels, again on Linux, this time looking at what detection capabilities might look like. How could people get better? How could people leverage what's inside attack today to protect their environments more effectively? So the three hypotheses that drove all of this was, firstly, I do an awful lot of offensive Unix, and I was kind of curious, actually, are people using my tools in ways that I wouldn't wish them to be? The second was, are they using the techniques that I would use? And then the third was, that point around, is attack representative of what the threat landscape looks like? And are the TTPs that I care about, or that organizations, our customers should care about, are they representing attack today? And that's kind of how it started. I am not a threat intelligence person by profession. I am probably an offensive security person first and foremost. I spend quite a lot of time building detection capability, but I started off, I'll build some honeypots, I'll see what I can find. I went and had a look at the kinds of places that you might find malware detonation. I'd recommend Malware Bazaar simply for the fact that it is open, free. You can go and run hunts on it tomorrow. Some of us might be fortunate enough to have access to VirusTotal. Think of Malware Bazaar as being like VirusTotal, but you don't have the entry cost. And it really is a good place to go and start learning about what's already happening if you're perhaps not sure. If you spent all of that time inhabiting the red space and you've never really looked at what an incident responder has to deal with, Malware Bazaar is perhaps an interesting place to start that exploration. But what I really wanted was high-end Unix malware. And most of the stuff that you get caught is IoT. Part of the Linux malware research project is about grabbing the stuff that nobody knows very much about. So if you look at that final example on that slide, an ELF MIPS binary, it's probably IoT, it's probably MITRE, it's probably not being very well classified, but kind of those kinds of binaries are the ones that I was interested in to really help me understand hypothesis 1, hypothesis 2, hypothesis 3. What are adversaries actually doing? So there you go. That's probably the most interesting bit of the hypothesis. We did find some people using our tools. Not very many. I was quite glad about that. But if you think Lazarus Group, Hidden Cobra, if you think UNC 1945 Light Basin, if they're doing it, how many others are doing it? We just haven't caught them. Particularly when you start to look at the systems that keep the lights on, that make your company money, that allow you to charge your customers effectively, that allow you to deliver your product, to manufacture your products, etc. These aren't necessarily things that are helpfully documented at kind of the operating system level. They're not necessarily things where you can go and grab syslog today and suddenly have a visibility of these things happening. Lazarus Group was targeting Swift APIs. Light Basin was manipulating GTP, the tunneling protocol inside a mobile network. So there's definitely room for improvement. But rather than just sit there and foster a frustration or go and build my own matrix, this talk is about how you help MITRE build theirs. So wouldn't it be nice to automate some of that analysis? I am looking for volunteers. If there are people who are interested in the Linux threat landscape that want to learn more about what's happening and how to benefit from it, those three in yellow are things I could probably give you ideas on things we could do tomorrow. I analyze threat intelligence from other vendors. I work for Cisco, but I go and look at what others are doing. Analyze articles is essentially an attempt to boil down some of what I see from other vendors into useful things that we can feed back into MITRE. The reason I do that is because I think sometimes there's a propensity to miss things. And inevitably, if I was writing my own, I would miss things too. But the point is, analyze articles is about giving us the ability to repeatedly go and look for those things in other people's threat intelligence reports. Triage binary does something quite similar on the binary side of things. I don't know how many of you have come across Kappa. So Kappa, from recollection, is Mandiant's tool for doing binary analysis, looking for the common signs of attacked TTPs. Triage binary is a somewhat uglier. It's a shell script. a somewhat uglier attempt to do exactly the same thing. And again, it's the kind of thing that if you're interested in helping MITRE improve attack, working on tools like this and feeding that telemetry back into MITRE is how you institute the change that perhaps you desire. And then at the other end of the scale, having done the analysis of the articles of the malware, mapping that back into an attack consumable format so that when Kat, I don't know if she's in the room, when Kat asks you if you've got examples of this particular technique you're saying isn't captured, you've got the answer at hand to say, well, yes, and this is how it fits in, and this is where it sits in the tactic life cycle. This is the kinds of things you need from a telemetry perspective, etc., to detect it. So there you go. That's more or less how I do detection on other threat intelligence reports from other vendors. I look at the content, I look at the kinds of words that are used, I tie them back to the kinds of words I relate to particular techniques. The analytics I have today has the capability to detect things that aren't necessarily an attack, because I'm looking for attacks and techniques that maybe we haven't yet identified. But conceptually, it's the idea of essentially doing statistical analysis across the content that all of the vendors out there, Cisco included, are putting out, and finding those places where there's opportunities for improvement. And you could do the same on any other space. Just because I've done it for Linux, you could do it for cloud, you could do it for OT, you could do it for something that MITRE doesn't yet cover. I'm sure the fight team would be thrilled to discover that there's a new source of threat intelligence around mobile networks, for example. And there you go. So these are some of the kinds of things that we're starting to pull out as potential techniques of the future. I say potential, these are my words, not MITRE's words, remember that. But different languages. We talk about the languages inside of attack, and we think about things like PowerShell and shell scripting. Well, a lot of malware these days is Go. Things like how they interact with systems, persistent storage, etc. Yeah, there's a whole raft of different things we could detect and learn if we choose to look for them. And the answer, and the question is, the question is, could a similar approach be applied to other areas of attack? I think it's for all of the people in this room, all of the people in the community to answer that, but hopefully you'll go back and you'll start to think about then how you can help Jamie and Adam and friends complete the mission. And with that, I am done. Just in time.
Well done. And I always just gotta, not only thank you for the talk, but everything that you've done to kind of exactly as you said, spur the community and start to address this hard problem. Exactly as you said, we do what we can, we do the best we can, really rely on you. But this idea and this model of really understanding what our adversaries are doing and breaking that down, these tactical techniques and procedures, and then more importantly, exactly as you said, thinking about why does that matter? How do we contextualize that? How do we actually defend that? How do we relay that to all the stakeholders that are going to make these threats not as actionable?
I Can Has Cake was a reference to the fact that Kat bought me cake for my birthday last attack on. That's for me is the reflection of a symbiotic relationship with friends, not just colleagues.
Yeah. Welcome back. Love the call out to the Linux channel. So if you haven't already been there, there's always some great conversations going on. I think Kat used to do a Monday Linux chat. So definitely dive in if you have any questions or ideas. Happy to share those. But with that, I wanted to thank you. We'll trade you. Small token of our appreciation.